Okay, let's go ahead and go live here, and we are going to do some coding here this morning. What I want to do is I'm working on this little project, and I could use a built-in package that does, like little web servers and stuff. For example, like Serve or using something like Parcel.js. I could also use another actual library to do this using something like Express or Happy. But we're going to build on some code that we worked on in the last Twitch session, which was just kind of coding up our own little web server using just the built-in HTTP module and then just the other modules built into Node itself. So in that last session, we had created this index.js file, very, very simple web server. And what I want to do is I just want to expand it out a little bit so that we can serve up JavaScript files, we can serve up a Favicon, stuff like that, into our web browser. So we're not building a full-blown type of web server here, anything like that. We're just trying to put together enough moving parts so that we can serve up an independent JavaScript file that we can then write code with and debug and stuff inside of the web browser. And the reason why we're doing all this is I'm working on a JavaScript course, and in that JavaScript course, it's really focused in on learning the language of JavaScript, but as part of learning the language, you want to use like some of the, actually build something kind of useful with it. And so we're kind of building this little server from scratch just to demonstrate how you would work with JavaScript to build something useful. And so we'll be doing this actually in one of the opening videos of the course. Not necessarily building a full web application here, but just enough to be able to run our JavaScript files both on the server side and the client side and then be able to debug them, so on and so forth. So with that said, let's go ahead and start putting this together. So we started off with this little create server function and we set it up to read back an index file no matter what URL you gave to it. Now I want to expand it out to be able to work with that Favicon and the JavaScript file. Now we're going to be doing all of this live, so I don't have a prepared code thing that I'm looking at. I'm not even really doing this from memory. A lot of the classes that I teach, because I teach them all the time, I have really all the content mostly memorized, so I can just kind of flow through the coding of it. But this is going to be more like me sitting at my desk working and looking up stuff and things like that. So as we go along the way, you'll hear me do some thinking out loud. You'll see me Google a couple of things. You kind of get to see the thought process that I go through when trying to put this together. Also, another thing about these live videos, I don't go back and edit them. So you're literally watching exactly what happened. You're not watching some edited production quality, finished product of doing video editing and stuff like that. You are watching me actually do this, and you are seeing all the mistakes and all I make and all the things I look up, so on and so forth along the way. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started writing some code. Okay, so we've got our read file here looking for this index.html. I really don't like the fact that we're kind of hard coding that path right there. So let's go ahead and create a kind of a starting folder where we're going to put all of our files. We'll just say const. And we'll just say www path, and we'll just give it our path to start with this right here. Cool, so there's our www path. Now, what we want to do is we can take this path and we can join this together with our index file, and we can do that by saying const, bringing in path, which is another module provided by Node. And path has a function called join. So you can say path.join. And then we could take our www path here, and we could join that to our file here. There we go. Now, what would be even cooler is if we had a way to read this path from either our package.json file or as an environment variable, so on and so forth. I think I'm going to go with the option of an environment variable, so when you actually run this from the command prompt, you can actually specify what folder your files are actually going to be in. So let's do this. We'll come into here and we're going to use the process object, and we're going to access our environment variables. All right, and then on here we can actually access a specific variable being passed in. You know, www path is fine, but I really don't actually like the name of that. Let's do this instead. Actually, hold on. I don't want to do it from an environment variable. I want to do it from the command line. So there's a great package out there we can use called yargs. That's what I'm thinking of. So we'll come over to npm here, yargs. There's a couple of these out there, and if I don't write Node programs for a while, I end up forgetting like which is the one that I like to use. But I did recently write a Node program, so yargs is at the front of my brain. And yargs here is a great way to actually pull in your command line options. So to get this started, we're first going to install yargs. So I'll come down here and say npm i-s-e yargs, and that'll grab yargs for us. I is just short for typing in install. Cool. All right, so there's our yargs installed. Now, coming into here, it'll actually give you some examples of how you can wire this up. We're just going to do something really, really simple here. So let's do this right here. So we'll come in and we're going to set this up so that we can access our args. And let's see, do I want to do, let's do, yeah, that'll be great. We'll grab this right here. So let's grab that, come over here. We'll paste that in, drag that up to here, and let's throw some semicolons there at the end. All right, now, so this is looking for ships and distance. Of course, we don't really want that. What we want to do is set it up to look for our www path, but I'm actually going to call this a different name. I'm going to call this content folder. So if argv is actually going to give us an actual content folder, then we'll set that content folder, and we're going to do, we'll set it as let, and we'll do content folder here. Cool. And we'll do our content folder, and we'll set it equal to whatever this is, if it's actually specified. And then let's grab that, pull that out. Okay, cool. So now I've got my content folder. Then I'll take my content folder here, and we'll actually swap out the www path. Great. Okay, so now I've got my content folder being assigned. Now what I'm going to do before I actually proceed any further with coding this, I'm actually going to verify this actually works. So let's come over to package.json, and let's go to our script section. So here we've got Node index.js. Let's go ahead and put on here a content folder. And what we're going to do is I'm actually going to make a copy of this one. Paste. And I'm going to rename this to www2. And then inside of my index file here, we'll just say hello world 2. So the reason why I'm going to do that is I'm going to first verify that if I specify www2, it works. And then I'm going to verify what happens if I don't specify anything. So we'll say content folder www2. If you go back over here to yargs, we can take a look and see it wants the equal sign there between the actual name of the command and then the actual option and then the value that we're assigning to it. So there's our content folder www2. Save that. We'll come down here and say npm start. Looks like we have an error. Let's see here. Bad option, content folder. Okay, so back over to here. Node, content folder, index. Put that to the other side. Shouldn't need to do that, but let's do it anyways. Okay. Make sure you put your yarg to the other side. So there's our content folder W2 starting on port 3000. Then let's come back over to here. Let's load up localhost 3000. Hey, there's my hello world 2. Cool. So now if I come back into here and I stop this, let's get rid of the content folder ww2, and let's come into here and let's run this again. Let's go ahead and hop back over to there. Okay, so now it's serving up from a different folder. Cool, yargs worked out well for us. So we'll go ahead and hit Control C here. I'm going to come back up here and add the option again. And there's our content folder. And I am going to make this, in the end, just www. And then up here, I'm just going to delete this. Cool. So now that we have a different, an option for a different content folder, if we decided to use this with like a different application or whatever, we could do that by specifying, well, a different content folder. Okay, cool. So now we've incorporated some yargs into there. And we're using the content folder to generate the path to index.html. You know, as you're going through and doing your code, the first variable names you may select for things may not end up being the variable names that you really want. Don't be afraid to refactor that. I work with a lot of developers in my classes who will pick, you know, variable names that maybe aren't super clear, and later on they'll wish they had changed them, but they didn't. And now they're always having to go back and kind of remember what the real purpose of that variable is. And that process of mapping a bad variable name, or maybe a variable name that's not as good as it could be, that mental mapping to the actual meaning of the variable really slows down coding. So you want to make sure you're always picking things that are really named well. And naming a variable well is really important. Take a couple moments to think about it and make sure it's got a very, very clear name. In this case, this is going to be our content folder. That's going to be the content we're going to be serving up from our actual web server. Okay, so now we need to go ahead and expand this out a little bit more. The next thing I want to add is I actually want to add a little bit of content that we can then serve up. I want to add a favicon first. So I'm going to come over here. And let me bring up Finder. Now I'm going to be navigating on Finder on a different monitor. You're not going to see this on the screen because, you know, my files are my files. No need to share my file system with the whole world. But let me come into here. I'm actually going to grab a piece of content real quick. And I'm going to grab my standard favicon here real quick. Let's grab it right here. Perfect. Okay, we'll copy that. And then let's come over to our project folder here for JS demo. You'll see it pop up in the Explorer in my editor here in a second. Okay, good. There's our favicon. So this is just a standard favicon that I use for stuff that I code. I actually built it using an online Favicon generator. In fact, actually, just for fun, let's see if I can find that thing real quick so you can use it too if you want to. Was it this one? Nope, it wasn't that one. It might have been... Yeah, I think this is the one that I used here. So if you need a favicon, you know, if you're a designer or whatever and you can make your own favicons, that's great. I'm not a designer, I'm a programmer. I don't really have any design capabilities or skills. In fact, that's been probably one of the biggest things that's hurt my career overall is my inability to make stuff look good. I know how to take pictures of things that look good and then convert that into code using, you know, CSS and slicing and dicing Photoshop files and stuff like that. But I am definitely not good at making anything look good. So I always look for tools like this that can help me do that. And this is the little Favicon generator. I believe this is the one that I used. And in addition to giving you all of the different variations of favicons, for supporting mobile devices and stuff like that, it'll give you some content like this that you can include at the top of your actual web page to be pulling in all of those things. All right, so now let's hop back over to here. Give me 1 second here. I'm actually going to close the vent above my head. My heating system has decided to kick into full gear. There we go. That'll calm down the noise a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look here at how to now, we've got the Favicon file. Let's actually add in our JavaScript file. So I'll create a new folder here called JS. And then inside of here, I'm going to create a new file called, we'll call it app.js. And all we're going to do inside of here is we'll throw a use strict here at the top. Now, most of you probably don't include use strict in your JavaScript code anymore because most of the time you're running your code through a transpiler, which will add it for you automatically. But because we're going to be loading this code up just directly into the web browser and not going through any type of transpiler at this point, I am going to apply use strict. Use strict, I used to spend a lot of time talking about what it did, 5 or 6 years ago. But now because everybody just kind of codes with it, nobody really remembers what it does. So if you want to go research that on your own, you can. We'll probably include a section on that in the JavaScript course. But for right now, just put it there and then you can just know you're good to go and then just code probably the way that you ordinarily code things and everything should probably be fine for you. Like I said, most of the transpilers automatically include that now in the final output code of the transpilation. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to just put a console.log hello world so we can see that the JavaScript code actually loaded and executed in the web browser. Now, in order for this app.js to get loaded up, we need to put a reference to it here inside of our index HTML file. So we'll say script source JS app. There we go. So now we've got ourselves this app.js file. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to set this up to actually serve up both this index, or not the index.js file as well, the app.js file, as well as the favicon. So come back over to index, which is our web server here. In fact, you know what I want to do to make this a little bit more clear? Because this index is going to get confused with this index HTML. I'm actually going to rename this to be server.js. That'll be good. So now we know it's the actual server. Because I renamed that, let me modify a few things here. The main file is no longer going to be index. It'll be web server. This main is really only needed when you're doing things like trying to import stuff from this particular package into another package, which we're not doing, but we'll go ahead and specify server.js as our main file. And then over here for the start, we'll modify that to be server. I think that'll make it a little more clear. Okay, so now let's go through and let's go ahead and update the server now to be able to serve these other files. So to do this, what we want to do is first, we want to think about the fact that we're going to be serving up this JavaScript content, this icon file, and this HTML file. In order to serve up all three of these, we're going to need to know ultimately what their content type is. To be able to say, hey, we're sending up, HTML content, JavaScript content, icon content, stuff like that. For that, we're going to need the actual MIME types for this stuff. So I'm going to create a new file over here, and inside of here, I'm just going to create some notes on the MIME type. So for HTML, it's going to be text/HTML. For the JavaScript content, it's going to be text/JavaScript. And then for the icon itself, the favicon, I'm not sure what that actual content type is going to be. So it's not usually something you actually code up because you're using another tool to do that for you. But let's come down here. Maybe it'll have some information here for us on that. So we've got, these are our PNG ones, favicon, ICO. All right, let's look it up real quick. So We'll say Favicon ICO MIME type. All right, so they're correct. We'll go right to Stack Overflow. All right, so let's see here. So it's going to be image X icon. So you see how we have to know that information there? All right, so image X icon. So we'll go with the image X icon for this, for the MIME type, and we'll copy that. Okay, good. So now we've got our MIME types, because we're going to need to send these back when we actually write back the content to the browser when it makes the request. Okay, so back over to here now. So here's our situation. We need to serve up whatever file is requested, and then based upon the extension of the file, set the MIME type. But we need to have a way of looking at the actual path that we receive and then combining it with this content folder to know where to find the file. So how am I going to do this? First, what I'm going to do is I need to refresh myself on exactly what the actual URL or path that's being passed to me through the HTTP server object. Okay, so I'm going to come into here and I'm going to say console.log request.path. It's either going to be path or URL. So we'll come into here, we'll say npm start. Let's come back over to our web browser. Let's reload this. All right, localhost did not send back any data. Looks like we had an error here. Let's see what our error is. Oh, request is not defined. That's because I put the underscore there in our previous video because we weren't using request. So let's go ahead and save that. Come back over here, reload. Okay, hello world. Okay, so request.path, that's not the property we're looking for. In fact, it's going to be request.url. But you can see trying out the path wasn't the end of the world. With JavaScript, if a property doesn't exist on an object, it just simply returns back undefined. So if you're coming from a C# or Java background, you have to realize you're not going to have the code completion and IntelliSense that you're used to in those other languages and in those environments. So here in the JavaScript world, you could go look it up in the documentation, which we would have done, or we will do if it doesn't work. But you can also just simply try it out and see what happens. And then you can see in this case, we got undefined. So that's clearly not the property that we want. So now let's do npm start request.url. Let's reload again. Hey, there we go. Now we got the actual URL. So what we want to do here is we want to take a look at this value here and understand how we can combine it with content folder. So if we take this URL and combine it with the content folder, that should actually lead directly to our file. The only case in which that's not true is the index file. And that's because the default is really just / and we want to map that default to be index.html over here. Now, if we want, we could make the actual default file be an actual option. So for example, we could say, let default document equal to index.html. Then come down to here, and we could actually check this for the default document. So you see how I'm doing this process? I'm not just coding something in the moment for the one particular task. I'm doing a little bit of extra thinking about, hey, is this something I might want to customize? Is this something I might want to have as a configuration option? And if I do, then I can go ahead and start kind of planning for that and kind of putting things together here. Now, because I've got these two options here, this is fine, but this is going to start to kind of crowd all of this code down here. One thing we don't like to do in JavaScript stuff is we don't really like having super long code files if it can be avoided. And this functionality for pulling in this data is really a separate piece of functionality. So what if I did something like this? What if I created a new file over here, and let's call this options.js. That would work. And then what if I came over to here and I just grabbed all of this code and I pulled this out, popped it into here, And then what if I came down to here and said module.exports, and then I'll just say content folder, and I'll say default document. So this is what's known as a shorthand property here. So you can say content folder if you want. That's definitely a good strategy if you get paid by the hour. But if you don't get paid by the hour, then you probably want to use the shorter strategy and get the project done faster. So there's our content folder there. Now, I can take these things and export them out and pull them over into server. So I could say const, we'll do a little destructuring. And the name of our options are content folder and default document. And then I can just say require options. Now we're using common JS modules here. We're not using ES 2015 modules. As you probably know, in ES 2015 modules, there's something called a named import. Well, in common JS, you can do something similar syntactically to a named import. It's not exactly the same thing, but syntactically similar to a named import through the use of destructuring like you see here. So I've got content folder and I've got default document. So now what I'll do is I'm going to come down into here, and when the request comes in, if request.url is equal to, and then we'll do just a /, then we know we're going to want to use the default document. So maybe here I'll just come in and say let content, let's do content item path, and we'll just say let there, and then here we'll come in and say content item path, and this will be equal to path.join, and we'll do content folder, and then we'll do our default document there. That looks good. And then down here we'll simply come in and we'll just otherwise use the content item path to be equal to path.join, and we'll say content folder, and then we'll pass into here request.url. Cool. So that'll actually get our content item path for us. Not too bad. Now we want to use content item path, and we want to come down here and paste that in like that. There we go. Okay. So now that we have that piece there, now what we need to do is be thinking about what type of file we're going to be sending back. So down here, we have this write head. And what I want to do is I want to have some way of basically sending back some headers that are going to indicate what type of content this is going to be. So you can see write head is going to take a status code, a reason phrase, and some headers. I don't really want to set the reason phrase though. I really want to set just the status code and the outgoing headers. So you'll see if you only pass 2 arguments, the second one will be the headers. So let's go ahead and come into here and let's set up some headers. So we'll say content type. Most of the time when things request headers, it's really just looking for a simple JavaScript object where each property name corresponds to the name of the header, and then the value of that property is the value of that header entry. You'll notice that I've got quotes around this, and that's because I have a dash here inside of the actual property name. Whenever you have a property name that doesn't correspond to a valid JavaScript variable name, you can put the dash in there. So we've got that piece there. So now what we want to do is actually specify the content type. Well, the way we're going to do that is by taking our file extension and then serving it up based upon the extension. So what we're going to need is we're going to need to actually create a little function here. We'll call it get content type, and we're going to pass into it the content item path, and then we'll use this little function to actually return back the content type for us. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm actually going to create a new file called utils. You see how I start to kind of expand this thing organically. As I need each thing, I go ahead and move to a new file if I think it makes sense. Don't ever be afraid to create new files, to refactor. all of that is essential to building these applications organically from scratch. Okay, so for that, what I'm going to want to do is I'll copy my get content type function name, and we'll come into here and we're going to do const get content type, and this is simply just going to be the file path. Actually, we'll call it file name. All right, so now all we're going to do is just check to see what it ends with. All right, so we'll come into here and we'll say switch file name. Actually, it's going to be ends with is going to be checking, so I really don't want to do a switch. Let's do if file name dot ends with, and then into here I can pass my string. So for example, I could say .js, and then I could do a return, and then I could say return, and we'll grab our text JavaScript. Oops, there we go. And we can do another one, ICO, and this will be my image X icon. And then for the HTML, now there's more, I don't know if they're really more efficient. There are other ways you can write this code. You could set it up to have like an object where you could basically extract off the end here and make these keys of the object and then make these the values that are returned. You can absolutely do that, but just for the sake of keeping this code extremely clear for anybody who's watching, we'll just keep it like this. And I'm going to say return text plain, which basically means just a text document. So if we don't recognize any of the actual extensions, we'll just return back text plain. So we'll go ahead and save that there. And we need to, of course, set this up to be exported. So we'll say module.exports. Now, what I actually like to do for ones like this is just set it up like that. And that keeps it real simple. Also make sure, throw your use strict here. And for options, let me throw that at the top too. And okay, so now that we've got our use stricts on there, we've got all that coded up. That looks good. Looks like I got an error there. Let's see here. Module exports. What is that complaining about? That's weird that that's red, but I don't think that's actually causing us a problem. So we'll keep rolling here. Okay, so now I've got my module exports. I've got my utils. I've got my server. So now that I can set my content type, all that looks good. And then down here, we'll keep everything else the same. Oh, make sure you import the get content type. And we'll pull get content type here from, or require, and then we'll just bring in utils. Cool. Okay. So now we've got our get content type there. So let's go ahead and save all this. Let's run our program, see if we have any errors, bugs. Looks like everything started okay. So now we're going to head back over to our web browser. To test all this out, we'll need to have the DevTools open. If you've never opened the DevTools before, you can click on the three dots here, come down to More Tools, and there are the developer tools. You can click on those. We'll zoom in a little on those, make those a little easier to read. Now you'll notice we have an error over here. Now I haven't reloaded the page yet. This is from an earlier load. Unexpected token app.js. Yeah, I didn't know how to process that. Now let's come over to our network and let's go ahead and reload this. And let's see what we get. Oh, there we go. So there's our three files. There's the local host. This was the index. This was the JavaScript file, and this was the icon. Okay. So if we come over here, let's see if we can verify all this loads up okay. So first of all, let's go to the console. There's our hello world. So this time it actually ran the JavaScript code. That's good. You can see where that was downloaded. You can see the headers here. You want to verify that we sent back text JavaScript, and then it executed it. Then we've got the favicon here. So it was able to download the favicon content type X image. There we go. Now, ordinarily that would show up here in our tab. I'm not sure why it's not showing up in our tab. That might be from an earlier load. We'll try that again in a second. And then here for our local host, you can see we got back our text HTML. If you're ever coding up your own little Node server, you really want to come in and make sure you're inspecting this stuff in the network tab. Make sure that you're getting back the content types and stuff that you're expecting to get. If you send back the wrong content type, sometimes it won't run the code and stuff. So you want to make sure you look at those MIME types if you're not familiar with them. Now, I want to make sure my favicon loads. So I'm going to copy this, close this window, open a new one over here, paste. And let's see. Yeah, we're still not getting our favicon showing up correctly. So let's take a look at fixing our favicon. First of all, I want you to notice that Chrome downloads it automatically by default. That's an automatic thing that it does. So maybe our problem here is our favicon has an issue or something like that. We saw that the favicon loads up over here. There we go. But maybe we need to figure out what it actually needs to be for its content type. So take a look here at the best Favicon generator. This has a favicon. So let's go ahead and let's open up the developer tools for this. And let's reload their page. And let's see if we're going to see a favicon listing in here. Let's see. We may not because it already previously loaded. All right, I'm going to grab that, open it up over here, and Veterans Day. I do not want to go to Google. I want a blank browser window. There we go. And then I want some developer tools. And then I want to paste that site in there like that. And let's see if we get a favicon here. Image. Yeah, no, we're not getting our favicon there. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's see here. Favicon MIME type. Let's look that up one more time. Let's say okay. Microsoft image X icon. Yeah, no, it's image X icon, at least according to Wikipedia. Well, I'm not sure why our favicon's not loading up here. We should have it load up. It's listed there. Let me do one last thing. So what we'll do is I'll actually put a link into our favicon. So let's do this. Let's see here. HTML for a favicon. It's like a meta tag, and I forget exactly what. Let's see here. All right, there we go. It's a link element. There we go. So let's throw that on. That's for a PNG. I want to do an ICO file. Yeah, no, it wants a PNG. Hold on one second. I do have a PNG version. We'll do the PNG instead. Give me 1 second. All right, I'm coming over to another folder where I've got a bunch of stuff. So let's copy this, and then let's go into here. Let's see. I want a new folder. Images. It's going to be a whole collection of images, not just the single file. Okay, great. So see, now I've got a whole collection of images here. It's all the same thing, just, the whole favicon thing. So I'm going to take this one that I've got here, and I'm going to delete that one, move that to the trash. And then what I'm going to do is I've got another file over here from another site that actually references all of that. Let me go ahead and open that up there real quick. And I'm going to grab this file here. All right, open this up. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to grab some links I've got here, and we'll grab this right there. All right, perfect. And we'll come back over to our index file over here. And I'm just going to paste these. This is just referencing the favicons that I have inside of this images folder there. So now let's go ahead and save that. I don't really have to stop the server because we didn't change anything on the server, but just to make sure we start off with everything being nice and neat and clean, I'll go ahead and start the server and come back over to here. And let's go ahead and load up our hello world again. All right, well, it's downloading both of our favicons, but it's still not populating it up here in our little header, in our little toolbar. I'm not sure what the issue is. The favicon should be loading just fine. So I think we have everything correct. For whatever reason, Chrome is just choosing to remember an old favicon. One last thing I could try here real quick is I'm just going to delete all of the content I have in Chrome. We'll just clear all that real quick, and we'll close these windows. And we'll say localhost, and we'll set it to 3000. Yeah, not sure what's going on with our favicon. It's always worked in the past, but of course we're doing this live, so that would be the time for the favicon not to work. Anyways, you can see here with our code that we've got a very simple basic web server here that's able to serve up all these different files. We probably should add a couple of additional MIME types to this. We do have some PNG files now inside of the image folder, so we should send back an actual PNG MIME type. So we'll say PNG, and the PNG is going to be image PNG, I believe. All right, so let's see. We'll add also one for the text CSS here in a second. Here are the image types. So image PNG. So we'll say image PNG. And then we'll come into here and we'll do one for CSS, text CSS. Great. So now you have a very simple content server basically for serving up just static content from a web page. We've set it up to have some customizable options from the command prompt using yargs. And then we have a little bit of server code here to simply receive those requests, check for a default document if one is not specified, and then actually serve up the file, write the headers, and everything's good. So this is not really something you would really use for a real production application. Obviously, there's way better, more fully robust tested libraries and packages out there. But you can see here by writing a little bit of JavaScript code here with Node, you can actually build yourself a nice little web server and serve up some static content, as well as explore some ideas here in JavaScript. So we'll be incorporating this code into a project that I'm working on to help teach people more about JavaScript, the actual language features itself. And thank you for joining our live session here today. And like I said, we did this completely live. There was no scripting ahead of time. There was really even no preparation ahead of time. It was just live coding, like I would do here in my basement when I'm home. And hopefully everybody will benefit and learn something from this experience. Thank you all so much. Take care.